This is the Lekker Rugby Pod with Harry Jones and MW Welman.
It's a Lekker Rugby Pod with Harry Jones and MW Welman. And Harry, I'm telling you right now, I'm sending my bill for my psychiatric treatment straight to the Bulls. Because honestly, no one's built to survive these kinds of highs and lows. This is ridiculous.
Not so lekker when it's your team getting bounced, eh? But I'll tell you this. You know, obviously we know the word fan comes from fanatic, so we're supposed to be extremely happy and extremely sad. This is the life of the fan. But my analogy for you, MV, is like once upon a time I was playing an American football game, and as you might know, it's all about being big in the gridiron. So you carb up, and to get ready for a very big game against the Lumberjacks. The team I was playing for had a pancake eating contest, not panacook, not the little tiny panacook wrapped up with the cinnamon sugar and the lemon. I'm talking like giant flapjacks. So it was axe the jacks with flapjacks, and it was an eating contest. And I was a famous eater back in the day, so I was signed up by my team, by my coach, and said, you know, come on, you're gonna win this easy. 5 minutes. How many pancakes can you stuff down your throat? And the only thing you can use to lubricate it down is syrup, golden maple syrup. Not the golden syrup, but the maple syrup. And so you're going to choke some down. People had different strategies. You know, one of my main competitors was just stuffing 4 or 5 pancakes in his mouth and then trying to syrup it down. Others were doing the bite, swallow. But no, you couldn't have milk or water at all. Let me tell you something, MV. I learned from that the worst possible position to finish in a pancake eating contest 24 hours before you play a game in the sun is second. I had one giant wad of pancake in my throat, and I couldn't get it down. I was just pouring syrup down my throat, and I saw my competitor swallow and win. It's almost better to lose in the quarterfinals. It's almost better not to make the playoffs. It's the worst when you're in the final at home, and you have the ball. As the clock is dead, it's in your hands. You're very near the try line. And one of your best, runners, Akan van der Merwe, has a ball in his hands, and you don't do the right peel off. So I'll just say that for my pancake eating prowess is no. Like if you know you're not going to win, then just don't be in the pain. But that's not how we're geared as rugby fans. We want it. You guys will be back. I think the Bulls overperformed this season. I think at the beginning of the season, you would not have said Bulls home final. So,
yeah, I wouldn't have said that a couple of weeks ago for that matter. You're right. But yeah, you know what now? I think a good thing you mentioned that now as a fan, final at home and everything else. I think, honestly, and I spoke about it this morning a bit briefly in Afrikaans, is they make too much of an occasion of it. And Jake is on about the fact that the teams are so young and the players are so young. We have a running joke about Cameron Hanekom's only 21 or 22, Did you know? That kind of a thing. And
I think he's 22, Jake. I think he actually had a birthday.
Yeah, he had it. We actually joked it, but we made the mistake. Jake was right. He is actually 22. But the point is, these are young guys.
Let the guy become a man. He's not a like anymore.
Yeah. And I want to talk about Cameron a bit more just now. But the point is, this is a young team. And they're not used to a lot of pressure, number one, and not used to a lot of limelight. And I think the mistake the Bulls made is like I said earlier, they made too much of an occasion of it. The fact, we sold 45,000 tickets. We've sold 46,000 tickets. There's 1,000 tickets left in the talk shows and radio shows and TV shows and Zooms and press and everything else. And people are, talking about Cameron as the next Dwayne Vermeulen, and there's a whole lot of hype, and Bull, Frick de Pre pitched up at Loftus, and Bakkies Botha pitched up at Loftus, and everybody was giving a bit of a rah-rah speech, and I think it was just too much. I tell you right now, and I saw it with Rowan Orke afterwards in the press conference, it was like a deer in the headlights, is the words that I used. It was too much pressure. They were overexposed. They did not know they can play rugby, these young guys. I mean, they were at school the other day. Now suddenly there's all this international attention on them, and they didn't know how to cope with it. And I saw it right the moment they ran onto the field, did well for a bit, and then they lost the plot completely. So I think, number one, Bulls just should have treated it as another week. Normal game, normal build-up, nothing special. Calm down the expectations, just treat it like a normal week, and they didn't. And I think that's the first place they went wrong.
So one of your theorems is that they believe the hype, and young guys can, by the way, maybe more than the old guys. Willie being out might have been able to calm everyone down, keep you grumpy, keep you grounded. But you tell a 21, 22-year-old kid that he's the best thing in the world, they kind of start to think it. And then the pressure is heaped on them in the minute the whistle blows. I thought it was about, so I thought about three things watching the game. One was Willie Leroux is always most valuable when he's not there. That's when you go, oh, I wish we had a Willie right now to break a very good defensive line, the best defensive team. And now we have, 6 minutes left. Can we make a break? I mean, he's just particularly skilled. Only Bowden Barrett, and he have the most try assists, in the last decade. Second thing is, I saw, and I'm going to call it the stripping transmitted diseases, the strip club. Bulls going for strips. Tackle the man first. Why are you giving him 3 or 4 extra meters? Why are you trying to do the miracle sexy strip? I know strips, can work. Faf did it in the World Cup final. Semi-final or quarterfinal, one of those finals. But it's a really bad thing to do if you're the initial tackler. If you're the second man in, by all means. Third thing, I just think Glasgow was really good at putting your boys in exactly the awkward. I talked to Ox and Scrum with him about 2 months ago, and he said his theory of scrums is to find the awkward. So find your opponent's awkwardness. I just felt like the Bulls looked a little bit awkward, last 20 minutes, last quarter, when Glasgow found it. They found all the ways that Glasgow likes, let's be in a maul competition because we're comfortable there. There's no team on the planet more comfortable about maul defending and maul making than Glasgow right now. The Bulls didn't look that great. They didn't know when to shear off. They didn't know when to use or lose. Other thing is, I think just making it a tackle competition was also bad. The Bulls have been living off, offload, go to the races, finish breaks. I didn't see any of that. So I don't want to make excuses on personnel. Everyone loses people. Marcel Coetzee, Willie Leroux would have made a difference. Glasgow probably have a list of people they would like. But I felt like in the end, it was there to win, and that's got to hurt.
I think on the day, I think we definitely missed Willie Leroux, number one. Last week, you saw for yourself that we were playing the game in the right areas because Willie was either a backup number 10 and making sure that we got the kicks over there. We played in their backyard. The entire second half felt like we were parked on our side, on the Bull side of the park. We just could never get out of it because there wasn't somebody like that. And the question I'm asking, or I was wondering about, is why didn't Johan Goosen do that? And then I remember that little test that he passed just before halftime, where he was deemed fit to continue playing. He wasn't fit to continue playing. That penalty kick that he kicked over the dead ball line, that could have been a line out on their try for us. It ended up being a scrum for them.
The head test was too long. The guy actually gave him 3 or 4 bites at it. And I've been there. I've been concussed, and my coach gave me 3 or 4 different chances to pass the test.
Oh, you try this one, yeah.
I think his bell was wrong. You're right.
No,
to your point about territory, though, so it's a very interesting stat. The Bulls actually had more of the ball, just barely, but they had no territory. It's 40%. That's a terrible way to play a knockout rugby. In Glasgow, again, put you in the awkward. The Bulls were playing uphill, the wrong part of the field, which means every time there was a minor problem or hiccup in the attack, it was off to the races for Glasgow, which, that's why it ended up being 3 tries to 1. Only 269 meters developed by the run. I think Bulls should have kicked more. 22 kicks is not enough in a knockout match. You look at some of the other knockout matches and people were kicking 40, 38 times. They gave up on the kick chase too quickly. And the final thing is defenders beaten. Glasgow was just running over Bulls for sport. 41 defenders busted tackles, run over tackles, run through tackles. When is the last time you saw a Bulls team lose the collision? That's what I saw. Yeah,
that's exactly what I wanted to talk to you about next. Is Franco Smith said in the press conference afterwards. I will just go back one step. One of the South African guys that I'm going to be talking to this week, Sim from News 24, he asked Franco on Friday, what did he think of Jake as a coach? And the conversation went the way of basically asking what his plan was. And Franco laughed at him and said, listen, I'm not going to tell you my game plan. I know Jake, but I'm not going to tell you my game plan. So last night, the same journalist asked him the same question. He said, okay, I can tell you now. We decided to take the Bulls on the strong points, the points that they've never been challenged on and that have been comfortable dominating. Scrums, lineouts, mauls to a degree, everywhere else, and defense. The Bulls were not that great on defense, but they sort of had a pride in terms of they can defend. And then most importantly, the big guys, the ball carriers like Elrich Lowe and those guys were just tackled back. They were carried back. They had absolutely no impact whatsoever. And it's because Glasgow attacked them on their strong points, not on their weak points. Normally, you would say a team would say, "Oh, but they're too good at this," and then so we're going to go around this or ignore that or try and take it out of the game. They said, "No, well, we challenge you on that," and that I think took the Bulls a little bit by surprise. That's another coaching thing, if I'm not mistaken. But I think that's where Glasgow won the head game. The Bulls didn't know what to do anymore because all their strengths were effectively neutralized.
Yeah, you look at one of the biggest edges on the stats before on the whole season was about scrum penalties won, and the Bulls were 17% up, a point spread, and Glasgow was one of the worst in the comp. So you would think that would be one area where there would be pay. Now, I think early on, and maybe not only just this game, but another game, the refs seem to be saying to us, we're not going to give you the penalty for just being superior in the scrum as much. We have to see a defined infringement. You have to stand up first, lose your bind, etc. So that didn't get the pay. Probably Jake was upset about that. But I do think is another thing, and Schalk Burger said this in comms, and I thought if there was a Franco gambit, on a chess game here that I think he won, is they infringed early. 17 penalties against Glasgow, and they didn't seem at all worried about that. It was New Zealand style, it was All Black style. Infringe the minute your opponent gets into the red zone on the first. Don't wait. Don't try to defend without fouling for 5-6 phases, and because then the ref already thinks, go to his pocket. Second, do it early, en masse. Everyone do it. Everyone is going to do it. That way you don't know if it was Richie McCaw, Kieran Reid, or Kano. You don't know who is who. It looks like not a foul if everyone's doing it. And then you end up doing just one penalty. It's always the best choice. Hussam then says, I'm not going to take the 3, which he should. He goes to the corner, and then we defend clean. So you foul, and then on the line out clean. I think Franco was okay with a 17-9 penalty count. It's always misunderstood. It doesn't matter in rugby if you have lots of penalties. It's going to be where the penalty is and why you did it. And if I make you choose between 3 and 5, you choose 5, you miss the 5. It was a good foul. It's great. So Schalk was really on that. And once he said that, I started watching it every time. And every time Bulls went into the red zone, they flooded the zone. They killed the ruck. They killed the breakdown. Even on advantage, they didn't let the Bulls go flip to the side and get the speed advantage. You never saw the speedsters going one-on-one. There was never. You never saw that. I think Franco knew that they would always lose evasion. And so Bulls started saying, but I can run over you. I can break my arm, break your leg, all that kind of stuff. And it's just mano a mano, machismo. It doesn't work. Glasgow's plenty tough. Jake Dempsey, Ferguson, they're tough boys. You're not going to run over them.
The big question that was asked last night, and I think Jake sort of almost lost his temper about that, is the fact that the Bulls played their final last week. They're having to up their game so much mentally and physically and strategically and everything elegantly that you could possibly imagine against a Leinster side.
It's a decent question, no? I don't think it's true, but it's a decent question. I thought about it.
His defense, firstly, last week was he said, if that was our final, then it should have been Glasgow's final as well, because they played against the defending champions and beat them away,
Yeah.
But the point was that the Bulls, maybe that win last week against Leinster took much more out of the Bulls than that win against Munster took out of the Glasgow guys. So that's my impression.
Maybe, but Glasgow made a lot of tackles a week ago too. Maybe. So what do you think about altitude being maybe a bit of a myth in the sense that it actually affects everyone, and that this kind of idea in modern sports science is you can find a way around it? I mean, I don't know what all they're drinking and eating, but I don't know if it's as big an edge, and it might matter a lot to a guy like Volko Low too. It might, like a big, heavy-set guy, might be starving for oxygen more than, whatever Horn, the scrum half, who looked like he could run for days. I didn't feel like Glasgow was tired at the end, is all I'm saying.
Another interesting point that came up in the press conference is Jake and I have been having this running debate this entire season about this altitude matters. And he was saying to me, he's a sports scientist and he studies sports science and everything. And it does matter, and it goes on. And I see the Scottish guys put up a bit of a meme about that sign in the tunnel. They changed it to say,
shots fired, man.
Does it matter? No, it doesn't.
Hey, they won. They can do it. Yeah.
And Franco said specifically, and this is something else I want to talk to you about, that game that they played against the Bulls a couple of weeks ago, where they almost came back. Jake himself said if that game was 10 minutes longer, they would have lost that game, or we would have lost that game. They learned a lot from that, Glasgow did, in terms of being able to stand up to the Bulls, but also being able to survive this altitude thing. They finished stronger than the Bulls did. And the same thing happened yesterday. They finished much stronger than the Bulls were dead on their feet. Like you said, altitude does matter. Even if it's your home ground, it still matters, like you said. What bothered me, if you have an altitude problem, people get tired and the lungs are burning, why do you wait until the 75th minute to bring on a new front row? Why do you leave your backup scrum off, backup fly off on the bench? It doesn't make any sense to me. Jake said this is what he's thinking. He said, yeah, listen, this is a final. If we're drawn, there's going to be a 10-minute extra time and the likes. They wanted his bench to be fresh.
Nah, that's wrong. That's wrong, Jake. That's how you think as a visiting coach. And I think you have to keep some reserve there just in case. As the home team, you have to come in brave. I think he said a week ago, be brave. And there were critical moments where he wasn't and the team wasn't. And you got to be brave like Rossi. Sometimes you pull some really early. Sometimes you run a bomb squad in there at minute 35. If you want to tell if you're not giving this front row penalty maybe the way they should, bring in a new front row. Sometimes the same monstering and the ref goes, oh, new guy, so I'll give you a penalty. There's some mind games there. Other thing is, I think if you're going to attach to a maul and you're going to come down to the end, it's like the 13-8 loss to Ireland in the World Cup. The problem with doing that is a good maul defense team knows all it has to do is stay bound. The ref doesn't want to give you the penalty. He's tired of doing the penalty again. So they're going to let you collapse the maul as long as you don't look like completely filthy. And your choice is, you tell Akker, if you get even a sniff and they pull you to the left, as he did, run over that 9. Just run over him. Take him with you. That's your best shot. I think it was almost this kind of, now we're scared to lose. And that can come from the coaching box. If you're not sending in reserves early, I don't know, there's just critical moments where I thought the Bulls looked a little bit shakier than the visitors. Why is that? You should always feel dominant at home. The full crowd, I get all that. But yeah, you should say that on the 50-50s, we're going to get them. So go for it.
Yeah, that's something funny to me. Second week in a row now that Chris Smith wasn't brought onto the field at all. And there's something there. I'm telling you now. We asked Jake about it a couple of weeks ago, and he said, yeah, Chris Smith has been given his marching orders. He'll be finishing at the Bulls after the Currie Cup. He's got nothing lined up, and they're giving him some time to go find something else. But I can't see any other reason why not to bring the guy on. I mean, Jan Goosen, like you said, got 3 or 4 chances to pass this bloody head impact test or whatever, and it didn't make it. And he still leave the guy on the bench.
They kept putting different numbers of fingers. They gave him 3 fingers, 2 fingers, 4 fingers. Like, okay, he's not getting it right. Why do you keep giving him different numbers of fingers?
So ridiculous. So the next thing I want to talk to you about is the captain. I know we talked about it briefly in the beginning, but the captain is a major problem for the Bulls. And even if Marcel is fit and ready, he can only be on the field so long. I mean, he's not 21 anymore. I wonder what they're going to do about a captain. And while I'm talking about that, I said earlier today as well, the Bulls built a lot of depth, which is admirable. But the problem is that they've built an A team and a C team. There's no B team.
Yeah.
The gap is too big between the first choice and the second choice. And I think that's fighting them. And we saw it at Northampton as well. When they sent the second team, it wasn't the second team, it was effectively the third team against the eventual champions. Clearly exposed. So they have to do something about that as well.
Yeah, that's probably harder to fix because it gets into financials and such. But so I think it's always a problem in a team when your team captain is not the real captain. Does it make sense? Like, I think the unofficial captain is probably Willie when he's on the field because he's organizing. If you ever had a live match with Willie and you just watch him, like I was in Sydney watching them against the Wallabies, and the amount of coaching he does on the field is unbelievable. He was putting Kane and Moody exactly where Moody needed to be. He was predicting exactly where the ball was going to go for the Wallabies. I don't see that when he was gone. So that's one thing. Other one is, why isn't Elrich Lowe? Why is Lowe not the captain? He looks like a guy that people listen to. When I see the huddles, he's the guy talking. I don't see Ruan doing that, either Ruan. And you got a kind of a quiet Bulls pack anyway. It's not a very talkative pack. None of the front rows are talkative. So it's Lucy's. So Hanekom, Lowe, these guys seem like people that, I mean, maybe Hanekom's too young, but in the end, I think, and probably Lowe's not that much older, but those are the guys that seem to be the actual leaders on the field. And then at the back, you see it's LaRue. And so if you go all season with the wrong people named as official captains, I think when it comes down to the, when it's like squeaky testicle time at the very end, Who do you listen to? Like, who can actually change the shape on the field? Not looking at the box, not waiting for the water boy, the physio to tell you what to do. I'm talking in these rucks, what do you do? Can someone say, stop stripping the ball? I remember many a time when you had Richie McCaw tell his guys to stop something. Like, don't do that anymore. We're getting nothing out of the strip. Let's put these guys in the ground. Let's make them go backward, because sooner or later, this ref's going to ping that in a good way. And then Goosen can take a kick. No, I just thought it was lost chances. However, I think, like I said at the top, the Bulls maybe we're not supposed to be this high. And I've got them ranked still in the top 5 in the world in the Harry Index. So,
we'll talk about that just
top 5
now.
in the world is not too bad, eh? So
Yeah, I was hoping to see a jump up to number 1. I mean, I was quite confident about this. I was thinking about sending you a WhatsApp to say, get your praises ready and break out the ukulele, like I said. And I thought the better of it, and luckily I did.
Yeah, I thought the Bulls were going to win on the final maul. I thought that it set up, especially like Akker scored so many points for Sale Sharks by shearing off the back. He's very good at meerkatting and then going boom, and then and he had only a 9 against him. He would have taken him with him. There's no way that 9 tackles Akker and puts him on the ground or puts him back. It's going to be either it's going to be held up by a 9 miracle, or Akker's going to score, and then you have a kick to win.
Yeah, Akker was limping. I don't know if you saw that before that final line out.
He was barely walking, and that might have played into. So I don't want to. So I never want to bash a player in that kind of situation, but I still back him in that moment to get Voos and just say, I don't care, my legs hanging off, but it doesn't matter. I'm just a big boy, and I can take a Scottish 9 into the try line with me.
Before I finish lamenting about the Bulls, it's going to take me a long time to recover from this. Highs of highs and the lowest of lows. Do you still think Jake is the right person, at least for the next 2 years, 3 seasons, basically?
Yeah, I look at the failure and I say, is it remediable? Yes. Is a lot of it about depth and personnel, which I think you're right on. Yes, that's not the coach's fault. There's limited finance issues there. I think he's making players better than they were when they came in. That's my test for a coach. Do they believe in the guy, and does he make them better? And did he overperform? Yes, I think top 5 in the world. Losing finalist in the home final. I think a year ago you'd say, "Oh, Jake, good job if you get that."
Okay, and then another burning issue, very controversial issue, is the issue of the neutral venue, and maybe an extra week between the semi-final and the finals. Your thoughts?
The latter one, yes. I think you look at all the really big comps in the world, the big ones for all the money. They have an extended period before the final for all the marbles match. Neutral, nah, I'm okay with rewarding a team for winning. And the problem you solve with making a neutral creates a new problem. So in the end, it's I think you just stick it the way it is. And also, I just tweeted something out about the biggest BS about rugby that has been disproved this year. One of those is that the home field decides everything. No, it doesn't. Just like a red card doesn't. Just like we need to fix rugby on some big level. No, we don't. It's a great match, great game, full stadium all over the world. I just think Bulls will look back. Those guys, if they never get back to a final again, those individually they'll look back and say we could have won that game. And so that second half was really bad. It was one of the worst 40 minutes I've seen from the Bulls in ages. And so you always look back and say, it wasn't the coach's fault, wasn't the general manager, it wasn't the guy signing. We had that game. All we had to do was play to our strengths instead of running into brick walls.
Another thing I just wanted to quickly add is the one good thing to come out of this is the fact that a mostly South African Scottish team won this final anyway. So I'm happy about that. And I'm happy that that coach might still be in blue in a couple of years' time, but in light blue. There seems to be quite a strong rumor going around that he's going to be the guy
seems very
who eventually
clever.
replaces
He's a clever coach.
I like him. I like his personality, honestly. I think the way he talks, a very strong Afrikaans accent, which I absolutely love, And the funny thing, Harry, when they sat down, it was Franco and Carl Steyn sitting next to each other. They were talking Afrikaans to each other. Skate bietjie op, man.
I ran into Carl Steyn on a train in Scotland once, and he was talking Afrikaans to his wife. And or I think it was his wife. I will not make up a gossip story here. And what's funny is he could feel safe to say whatever he wants in Scotland, in Afrikaans, and I was literally going, "Oh my God, you're being funny right now."
Yeah, that is funny. Okay, anyway, let's talk about the Springboks. The much anticipated debut of Jordan Hendricks at number 10, which I questioned right from the offset, and then the what do you call him? The scrum cap wearing, hip swinging. Cap wing. What was you put out a little poll on Twitter or X? What is that scrum cap wearing wing dynamo kind of position? What do you think? Which option won at the end of the day? What are we going to call these people?
I don't know. I'm getting some really good suggestions that I have not even suggested. So I'm going to wait till the poll's over. But one thing I liked was blind back. The idea that you have the horses in the stalls and they have that blinders on. And I said blinder back, and someone improved it and said just blind back. And I just think they play blinders. They focus. It's no reason to have a scrum cap as a wing. It's almost sure to be dislodged at some point when you don't want it in your face. But there's something about it. It gives them superpowers. Look at the scrum cap guys. They're crazy. So I would say this, a long time ago, Rassie made it clear that he wants to build depth, that he views the beginning match or against a team that's essentially limited. Like, Wales ran 71 times for 174 meters. That's not a threat. I mean, like if someone's taking 70 carries and gets 174 meters, when you give them, a few for the fullback, contrast Boks 507 meters of not that many more carries. You should be able to experiment. That is the game that you should be able to experiment. You want to build some depth. You have a structure, you have Eben, you have Peter Steff, you have the guys around to make it okay, you have Faf, and then you stick in a 10. I get all that. But then you mustn't also be sentimental and say, oh, give him time. That's harsh. It was terrible. It was one of the worst debuts I've ever seen in my life. Jordan looked panicky. He was inaccurate. He made incredibly bad decisions. He tried to offload from the deck at one point, following 7 other errors. So it's a failed experiment. Doesn't mean he gets another shot. Sure, but you have to say then it really is your last chance, because it's not going to work if someone plays like that inside the system. You can see the effect of Tony Brown already. So when Jordan didn't stuff it up and got it out, and when Sasha came on, it got out to the wings more and the trams, you could already see a different style. Is it fixed? No, it's not ready. It's still rough, but 5 tries against a fairly decent defensive team is nothing to sneeze at. The Boks got a lot of breaks, busted a lot of tackles, never lost one ruck. So that was nice to see. The cleaning was really good, nice and low. Never a card in it. All the cleans were good. And so the only thing that we have to work on is sort of the knock-ons and handling. And my Tony Brown offense, Tony Brown's attack is all about the shifting point of attack. It's the stuff that Bok fans have been saying for ages they want. Rassie is building a nice bromance. There were 2 moments where he's turned to Jerry and to Tony, and they were yucking it up. They were smiling. They were punching each other. Rassie was all smiles. So he liked it. But I don't want to overlook Edwill van der Merwe, who had one of the best debuts I've ever seen. Is they're falling into this kind of special position that we're talking about on Twitter. The number one response so far is Safaback, which is interesting because it is a particularly South African skill set to have someone who's equally brave and competent on defense. The only one that's come up so far is like Shane Williams and Darcy Graham, are 2 guys that are sort of quick scatterbacks who can run around. And so Safaback is sort of the nom de plume that we're coming to. But there's something about Edwill that looked exactly like KLA. It looks exactly like Cheslin Colby, where there's really not a position on the field that they look uncomfortable in. It doesn't matter about their size. It doesn't seem to matter at all. Edwill's very strong too, by the way. But it just seems like he had time. He rounded Rio Dyer with ease. I'm just straight up, got to his outside and went around him. That's not that easy. Rio's a quick boy. So I think that looks good. It builds depth, to your point about depth, which is, obviously one of the most important things in rugby nowadays. And I did like some of the efforts of Ruiz at number 8. So that's a straight up competition between Hanekom and Ruiz. That's good for South Africa to have a good problem, have 2 guys going well. At 10, I would look elsewhere.
But so I want to ask you, number one, I like that cap wing option you had. Cap wing sounds to me like a bit of a Batman thing, sort of. You just need the cape as well.
I like the idea that the cap gives you special powers for
Yeah,
some reason.
me too. I like that name. It's just, you know, it hits home with me. And then in terms of Edwell, I wanted to just say that double tackle that he made.
Battle stats.
It's incredible. I mean, just you told me that how strong he was. Remember, you told me a couple of weeks ago how strong he is.
Yeah.
And that's the first thing. And the second one is he's incredibly quick. I'm telling you, it's not just a question of building depth. He sort of, you know, made a mark there that, yeah, he might not just be the backup much longer, if you ask me.
They asked him a really awkward question. Actually, it was a really good interview post-match, and someone said, "What do you have to keep doing to have the jersey or something?" And it was really good, by the way. He's like, "Nah, I just the day. I'm just filling in. I'm happy to be here." He did all that stuff, but behind it, I can see in his eyes. I can see in his eyes behind it, like, why not? Yeah, let's go. That's great. I think in the Rossi era, one of the most important thing is no one owns the jersey. I mean, there's a couple of people that come close. I mean, it's hard to say that Eben's not the best lock in the world. But a lot of the other positions where you would say, oh, that's taken. I don't know. I think he likes the idea that everyone's looking over their shoulder.
Yeah, that's nothing as good as much of an incentive as someone knocking on the door, you know.
Yeah.
You're never comfortable.
Keeps you honest. Yeah.
But you mentioned 10 earlier, and I think there was a couple of alarm bells going on off in Cape Town when the actual guy who should be playing number 10 at the Stormers ran into the field, and someone popped off of a 51-meter penalty and just showed everybody that he should be the number one choice. And I've been making my case for bringing him to Pretoria. I'm talking about Sasha van der Gomezulu, of course, and then to my utter disappointment, he went and signed a 3-year contract to go play second fiddle to Mani Libbok at the Stormers. I mean, that guy is just a revelation, what don't you think?
Yeah, he's got the confidence of superior athleticism. Feinberg was on glue. He's just got the idea when he gets, like, he actually called for the kick. He said, give it to me from his own off. That's pretty ballsy when you're a young guy. He looks to me like he's to the manner born, like Willemse did early on. Willemse with that extreme quick burst and vision. They're not afraid. I think there's something in the mental makeup of Mani that's essentially humble and likable. Might be a nicer guy to hang around with. I don't know. But there's something about Sasha that kind of says, nah, I'm the man. Give it to me. So I think that's a good problem to have with Damian healing right now. I think Sasha can play various positions, whereas Mani is more of a locked-in 10. One thing about having someone who's a superior goal kicker, not every country relies on the 10 to be a goal kicker. I mean, the French have relied on 9s for ages, the Scottish on 15s. So if you have someone like Sasha who can nail it that easily, what a ball strike too. I mean, he had plenty on it. He could have made it from 60 at sea level. Yeah, I think that's a good problem. I would say this, Sasha has been looked at as one of those players already. I think it was just confirmation. I didn't have any doubt. I would have been actually surprised if he folded. Whereas when Jordan ran on and the very first kick at goal, I thought, oh no, he doesn't want that. He doesn't want the kick. And it was the easy one. It was a one that you and I could have actually made, 50% of the time. So, yeah, I think that's it. You know, you look at kickers and you can almost sense it. In the French semifinals for Stade Francais, there was a guy who hit the poles 3 times. Reminded me of Bowden Barrett in 2018 for the All Blacks against the Boks. You can just tell sometimes when the player's not ready to kick. Gordon didn't look ready to kick. Sasha did.
That thing, Nas actually said something about it this week. He doesn't know why kickers take so long to kick the ball. You know, put the ball on the tee, do your thing and step up and kick it. But they wait until the last possible second and would put themselves under so much pressure, Mani especially.
Sports science has proved this, and it's the best analogy is golf. So the longer you stand over a ball, the harder your lactic acid builds up. You have negative thoughts. It's actually hard to do it. Andre Pollard put it best in that interview he's had when he said, you embrace the moment. And instead of thinking about what if I miss, you go, how cool would it be if I made it? You can imagine you don't want to have that conversation in your head for longer than about 10 seconds, because at about 15 and 20 seconds you are thinking about missing it.
I should have done it 5 seconds ago. Yeah, you're right. I'm talking about Sasha now being whatever his best position might be, which I insist is still fly off. It's either center or fly off or fullback. Now, Fassi didn't have a bad game. He was much better defensively than I thought he would be. But Sasha seems to be the direction the Stormers may be thinking about him. Maybe only problem there is they've got Warwick Holland and Damien and now Sasha. So I'm saying Sasha seems to be almost surplus to the Stormers requirements. I think, honestly, in the terms of, interest of good
No, we want him.
neighborly, bring him to the Bulls. I think he'll do much better there.
We'll keep him, thanks.
Who says
Fassi
we'll
was,
keep him?
Fassi was definitely a question mark going in, and he had some things go against him. He had one of those, cards for the whole kick the knee up thing, which I think is a little bit picky. When you're in the air, I mean, just tell me how you feel in the air when you try to figure out how to organize your limbs and come to ground safely. It's not an intentional karate kick. But I like the fact that he came back from that and ruled the air. And so there's things about Fassi that I don't think are deeply rugbyfied yet. I think he's still learning some of the nuances. But I like a guy who's better athlete than all the other guys on the other side on an issue that comes up a lot at fullback, which is going into the air and catching it. Who's out leaping him? Who's out quicking him once he has the ball? He has a superiority of that. He knows when it's one-on-one into the air, he's going to beat all those guys. He's going to beat Jordy Barrett. He's going to beat Liam Williams. He knows how to get the ball in the air because he can hang.
Now, in terms of types of fullback, we talked about Willie earlier about the difference he's made to the Bulls, being a coach on the field, everything, but also those strategic kicks. And then Jake said something in the press conference last night as well about Devin Williams at fullback, that if he only made a chip kick and that one break that he had, he could have scored. And he said Willie wouldn't have made that break.
True.
So you have this kind of fullback like a Fassi, and
I know what's
the right one? Which is the right choice?
To me, it's horses for courses. So there are teams like the Wallabies you play against where Fassi would actually work really well. And remember that the kick that Jaden Hendricks had put up for Kanan Moody in Sydney, and it was spot on, and Kanan just took it to the house. And it was like nothing they could do to stop it. They literally, unless they wanted to chop him down at the knees, they couldn't have stopped it because the kick was perfect. He could jump higher, and once he hit the ground, there's no one going to catch him. That's Fassi.
Okay. I'll remember. What's Australian wing's name again? The one that was so like flabbergasted when Cootie just stole the ball from him.
Korobete.
Yeah. There we go. I'll never forget the look on his face. What the hell just happened?
Why is he 10 feet in the air? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. The other debutants, BJ Dixon, how did he do for you?
He was thinking too much. I think for my blind side, I just want people to move someone. I want you to knock on the door. I don't want you to be too fussed about whether it's legal or not. Just hurt people legally or illegally a little bit. It's okay. I don't think he hurt his chances. I just think I would look for a little bit more mongrel from him on the day, because that's what that test was all about. Wales will always give you a nice gutter room, ballroom brawl, like somebody insulted your mother and I'm going to go outside and beat you. I wanted to see him more of that. But sometimes it takes a longer for one of those physical positions, and blindside might be the most difficult position as a young guy to come in and play besides prop. You're in dark places. But okay, fine. And then who else was a newbie?
No, we covered them. It was Jordan, it was Sasha, it was Edwell, and it was BJ Dixon. Yeah. We covered them, yeah.
I think we had a prop in, but I forgot his name. Who came in and he did
Mtunu, yeah.
Yes, yeah. He was good.
Now the thing is, one thing that bothered me a little bit was the ref being ox. He pinged the dominant scrum. That
for dominating too much. Yeah, David Flatman was really on that on Twitter. He said, "What else is he gonna do? He stayed square. He didn't bail out. Didn't walk around. No, that was just badly done." But in all, I'd say refs had a pretty good weekend. I try not to talk about them anyway because it's a losing thing. Once you go down that road, now you start looking at every mistake. In the main, I think teams could figure out what the ref wanted, what picture they wanted to see. I hate that phrase, but that's what they say. So,
on that subject of the refs, Jake was sort of hinting in the press conference, hinting broadly, what's the right word? Quite openly, that the way the ref blew the mauls didn't suit the Bulls. Any thoughts on that?
Adapt or die. Adapt or lose. This gets back to your other point about Ruan being a captain. I think you can imagine if the captain is John Smith. If you can imagine the captain is Sia Kolisi. With his best mate Eben, I think they sorted it out. They figured it out. They go, okay, so they're doing this. So let's not only we stop doing what we were doing, let's do more than they're doing on what's working and flip the script. Yeah.
So what do you think? Number one, did the Springbok experiment work? And secondly, what do you think we learned from this call it an experiment against Wales?
It's as important to know who's not a test animal as it is to find test animals. So I think it's very well done to hide a really poor performance by Jordan Hendrickse inside some superlative ones. That's what you want to do, is have just enough, not like Bloemfontein a couple of years ago, just enough where you still win the game and you win it comfortably, 5-1, but you get to see what someone's made of. Again, I'm not saying Jordan's out forever. I'm saying already now he has a mental issue with that level, which is just a little bit up. Less time with the ball, less time to decide. You get smashed hard. Everything's a little bit harder. You realize on the pecking order, maybe he's fifth, maybe he's fourth, maybe he's there. That's okay. And then you found a couple of people where you thought, I'm pretty sure Edville will be able to be okay, but now he's okay.
I want to just say something about the Jordan Hendrickse situation. I said this before when he was picked. I said this. Remember the big games, how he faded. Montpellier, he faded for the Lions. Yeah. Every time there was a big game, he faded, and he just did it again on Saturday. And he was thrown into the deep end. Starter in a test. I'm sorry, he just didn't live up to it. I don't think, you said we might see him again. I don't think so. Honestly, I don't. Maybe as a center with a different position, not a fly-off.
Yeah, he also might be a training ground guy. So sometimes the coaches can only work with what they see in practice. They don't want to go with what the regional, provincial, franchise coaches think, because sometimes they're wrong. They want to actually see. And maybe on the training ground, he was superstar. Probably. That's probably what happened. And now they realize, no, it doesn't translate into test. It's okay.
Interesting thing I learned this week is Mani went along because Mani can emulate the opposition fly-off. He plays on the training ground like the opposition fly-off does. That's one of the reasons why he went with the squad, even though he wasn't selected.
Interesting. There's what is that? I think it's a basketball NBA. They have a particular guy that makes every roster because he's so good at mimicking LeBron James. So it's very difficult. I love that. I love that kind of thinking. Actually, I really like the way the Tony Brown attack looked. It's ragged. People didn't know where to be sometimes, but you can imagine that same attack fitting in when Delende came on, for example, it really cooked. So when you had Sasha and Delende, who was the outside? Creel. That was nice. That looked really penetrating. It looked like a thing that the wings could feed off. So yeah, I think that looks good. As far as being stingy on defense, Jerry, I think his D looked good too. So I don't think it's going to be a terrible hangover Babalas from Ninaber. I think the system's bedded in with enough cohesion that you can do a little tweak or two. I would love to see more counterattack. I thought the Boks in the last 3 years were the best on counterattack. That Twickenham game that ended Eddie Jones's England career, unbelievable. Just everyone go to the races. Everyone knows where to be. A structured counterattack like the Kiwis do. Not pell-mell, not looking around. You know where the guy is, and you don't even have to think. You just go, I'm flipping to my right because I know that KLA is there.
Always interesting to me, are they planned that? How can you plan for something that's unstructured and unexpected, and there's still someone there? That's next level coaching, I think.
Yeah, so the Kiwis talk about how in the first 2 seconds when you get turnover ball that you need to make 2 passes. Boom, boom. Like nothing sticks. No one pounds the ball into the sand or whatever they call it. They have a specific term, and they love the guys who when the ball's on the ground and it's fumbled and you have the advantage anyway. You just don't even catch. You don't even just flip it. You literally bat it with your hand. And next guy does it again, because the minute now you're in space with unstructured and you got a guy like Creel, you got a guy like Colby. We like that. We always like that. That's the only thing we want. It's so hard to get it. If you fumble around with holding the ball, or you start looking around, or someone starts running around in circles, you've already killed the moment. Now they reset. So I think Tony Brown will bring that kind of Kiwi, Japanese counterattack mentality. And it's going to be a question of what do you do in the first 3 seconds of a turnover? And you're not going to be playing if you don't know how to do that.
Completely irrelevant remark, but quite... what's the term that you would use here? Relevant. It's irrelevant, but it's relevant. Doesn't all these bloody players look like First World War heroes or something with their mustaches and their short hair?
Aaron Wainwright has the worst one. I swear he got carded just for the stash.
He looked like Niles Botha's grandson, I tell you.
Yeah, that's not good. I don't know what's going on there. Maybe it's ironic.
No, we joked about this Kiwis before, but anyway, that's I think another game. The Twickenham experiment. Do you think that it's not a bad idea to do that annually? I mean, it's a nice little coffer filler, if you want to call it that.
Brand building. Boks got to build brand. It's already one of the best brands. There's so many Saffas living in London. It's beautiful. I think it's great. More of that, please. All Blacks I know have signed up to play some tests in the States again and again. Those always seem to work out. It's okay. You're always going to have a full amount in South Africa, but there's enough diaspora. There's enough people who bleed green and gold. They just want to see a test. It's great.
Right. Before we get to the Harry Index, to be able to look at that objectively and completely subjectively, is we need to know what happened in Super Rugby. And I mean, if your final is a 41-10 scoreline, that doesn't say much for the quality of the competition, or am I completely wrong here?
No, there were three good teams, the Blues, the Hurricanes, and the Chiefs. And this is definitely one of those situations where the Chiefs played their final to beat the Hurricanes at home in Wellington. Had the Canes survived and got into a final, it would have been a better final. Like the Blues, Hurricanes would have been the 1 and 2, throughout the whole season. Both of them only had 2 losses. The Chiefs snuck in because they are a giant killer, but they lost 2 hookers a week ago. And you can scoff at that and say, but if you lose 2 hookers or you lose 2 nines, you're kind of hosed. I mean, there's no way to play lineouts, and lineouts are, your launch pad. You look at how that thing worked out. The Blues brought their A game. They played so when the best team in the comp plays their best match of the comp at exactly the right time in the grand final, you're going to have a problem. And so why I have the Blues at number 2 in the Harry Index, by the way, is I can imagine putting that All Black front row, Patrick Tupoloto, and then having Akira Owani, Papali'i, and Sotutu, my big ball runners. So I have 4 monster ball carriers who don't mess up, they present really well, and they always win the game line. And then behind them, I have like Caleb Clark, Mark Talea, untackleableness, Rico Owani. I mean, anyone heard these guys? Yeah. So you have All Black attack machine. You have Harry Plummer playing a really good season. Like everyone scoffed at him, but he's literally playing like a sort of Pollard type, doesn't mess up, made all these kicks, tackles well, runs well. So it ends up, it was a rout. But I just think that shows that the Blues could, and should, and would do really well in a club World Cup. There'll be a handful. When you have that many All Blacks and you have that many players who they could play for other test teams. And if you slotted any of those guys into the premiership, for example, they'd be like on the team of the year quickly. So Tutu would, 22-year-old, rangy, one-handed, pick up at the base, monster you offload. He's a nightmare. So I loved it. I thought it was a great game. I like that the Eden Park was full, but I was sorry the Chiefs didn't show up.
Yeah, I was a bit disappointed as well. I mean, I actually woke up and stood up, got up early and made sure to watch this game after I watched a bit of the England-Japan shambles. But I mean, it was nice to watch. I like Damien McKenzie. He wasn't really in the game, not that much. They scored the 1 try, and that was.
They didn't get the ball. They were like the Bulls in the second half in a way that they just couldn't get into the game. And when you give a team like the Blues that kind of ball in your 22, they just keep running until they score. It's not even complicated.
I'm interested in your Harry Index. I want to move on to that now, and we'll talk about the effect this. You've only got 1 Super Rugby team in your top 10, which is now the Blues, the champions. And you've got them at number 2. And you said earlier that if Toulouse gets beaten by Bordeaux, then the Blues will be the best team in the world. But the rest of the Super Rugby teams don't feature at all. What does that say about the quality of that competition?
Yeah, so I don't go with a simple league-to-league comparison. The middle of Super Rugby isn't that good. That's clear. But the top is just good. When you have that many All Blacks and they were in the final of the World Cup, and I know just from my eyeball test that Caleb Clark would do fine in the top 14. Caleb Clark would be a star if he was at Glasgow. Why do I know that? Because guys, so Super Rugby teams from South Africa played against that same caliber for ages, and we know what happened. We know that if it was Kyle Steyn versus Caleb Clark, there'd be one outcome. We know that if it was, that loose trio is considerably better than the Bulls loose trio at this moment. Will they, will Hanekom be as good as Sotutu back at the end? I don't know. But right now, Dalton Papali, Akira Owani, and Hoskins Sotutu is just one of the best loose trios going. So I think they do fine. As far as what would have happened if the Hurricanes had won, then they would be in the top 10. They would. I don't know if they'd be near the top. And depending on what happened in the final, if they beat the Blues, then it would be them near the top. But I do think that the ERC has critical mass. I think putting 4 teams from the ERC in the top 10 sends a big message. It sends a message that any one of those 4 teams, Leinster, Munster, Bulls, Glasgow, any one of those 4 teams could have won the ERC. You could argue that Leinster should have. You could argue that Munster should have. You can say that the Bulls were one, Acker tear away from winning. So that's fine. Top 14, I think, is the underperformer here. I think Stade Francais and La Rochelle didn't look as good as I thought they were when they came down to the crunch time. And the Harry Index always values head-to-head, best versus best the most. So the Blues don't get to play the best. I'm just imagining, unless I've missed something in the last 150 years, that the All Blacks are pretty good at rugby, that they do okay. And then Premiership's the big loser. In fact, the Saints might tumble a little bit more, depending on what happens in the final. But yeah, I feel strong about it. It's funny is these clubs have reached out to me now. The Blues is chatting with me. Some of the French guys, the ERC, they actually taking the index seriously, because I didn't do it in a way where I just used numbers. I used my thinking cap.
The problem for me with the top 14 is the number of games that they play. Those guys are out on their feet at the end of the season. They play hundreds of games. And I saw a stat this morning about how few the Super Rugby guys play in comparison to what the guys in top 14 play. Tests your depth. They played in 2 different competitions as well. I mean, it just stretches them. That's why they get paid the big bucks, I suppose. But I mean, to me,
it's a grind. Yeah,
it's a grind. I mean, that's why they're probably going to be sending B teams overseas lately as well. That's what the guys are they can't play anymore by this time of the year. At the end of the season, they're just dead. And does that really help the quality of the competition?
On your point on the semifinals, I looked across that issue exactly. And Toulouse had only 4 players over 1,000 minutes for the season. La Rochelle had 11 over 1,000. So it showed at the very, very end of it, the pointy end of it. Stade Francais against Bordeaux. Bordeaux had, let me look at this, 5 guys over 1,000. Stade Francais, only 2 players in their starting 15 were under 1,000. So heavy legs, G-forces, multiply that by number of carries, number of tackles. Even if it's a failed tackle, it just the stress on your body. You could look at with Hanekom. I mean, Hanekom went off, and you just felt like, geez, what would have happened if he was able-bodied? At top 14, they can take one guy off and put another test international in. They can bring in Lavani Botia. They can bring in Jack Willis. They are literally taking the best players from other countries and putting them on the field. South African teams and New Zealand teams will never have that luxury. Never. There's no possible way that the best players from England, Wales, Ireland, Scotland, France are going to come substantially play in the SAFA teams.
Yeah, that's one of Jake's biggest challenges, I suppose. Now that and he keeps harping on about it, bring the South African players back to South Africa. And his theory was that you have a trickle-down effect. So the guys that are playing at the Bulls right now, the ones that are sort of the C team that I'm talking about, you have these guys like Ergius Neyman coming back, and he desperately wanted Jason Jenkins to come back, for example, as again to the Sharks, which still sort of, fulfills his criteria. But then these guys come into the team, and the guys that are there at the Bulls, for example, or the Sharks, wherever, that are not just quite, but they will move down to the next level, to the Cheetahs and the Griquas and whatever. And those guys will go down even further, and they will strengthen the club systems and everything else. He thinks it's going to have that sort of a trickle-down effect. I don't think so. I think the guys are just going to stop playing or leave. These guys dropping down will go somewhere else. Another guy I speak to says a lot of guys play in America, or you said it, because they're not good enough to find a place in South Africa. So go to America, get paid in dollars. So I can't see that theory really working that well.
And start. So players like to start. Players like to get minutes. So if my choice is I can be the worst player on a great team or the best player on a bad team, don't think that everyone picks the good team. A lot of them actually say, yeah, but I want to kick for goals. What are my stats? I want like Sam Windsor is a very good Australian player. We're going to have him on our pod, 8-9 pod tomorrow. He's had a whole career in Seattle and Houston. He's the MLR leading point getter. What would his career have been like if he was always the third string at the Brumbies and he got 50 minutes a season. And, is that really fun for a 26-year-old, 27-year-old guy? I don't think so. So I think we have to understand the world market's there. South African players are now very sophisticated, not just farm boys or guys from townships that you can, tell you got to do this, you got to stay here, and you're giving up on the brand, the Bok brand. They don't care. I mean, it's like, I'm going to go to Japan. I'm going to bank. I'm going to have per diem. I'm going to get skills. Looks like to me from each league, you get different skills. From Japan, you get incredible aerobic fitness. From playing in top 14, you get, physical. You still you're allowed to fight there. From premiership, you get scrum mastery. And playing in the URC now, you get like the ability to, if you're Steven Kitsoff or someone like Archia, you can actually still play with your mates, but live in a different place. Maybe it's fun. I don't know. So I just think we have to understand, like Jake's right, obviously, that depth really matters. But how do you find the money to pay Snyman to stay? How? He gets paid so much by Leinster now to jump from Munster to Leinster.
I was in the lift one day with Jake, and he got a call from Johan Rupert. I should have asked him some money there. They're quite close, those two. Ask him some more money.
The money under the table, the money around the table.
I had some interesting things this week,
the Free State.
I'll talk about it. But, interesting things. Anyway, listen, we've covered an hour now, believe it or not, in total, more than an hour. So I suppose we have to wrap it up at some stage. Yeah, that was lekker, man. I appreciate it. That was lekker. Let's say it again. This Lekker Rugby Pod is getting lekkerder every week.
I think people like a solid rugby chat that's unpretentious. Some of the reviews have been really interesting. Just the idea being like really dig in. I think sports on TV is very rushed. You can never develop a point. Plus, everyone's trying to make their own personality brand and be all crazy. I think it's great, man. I think it's good to talk to you. The audience may not know this, but we talk offline. So it's never enough. So it's all good, man.
Yeah, you must just stop posting those pictures of the Bulls getting whipped, like the Pyramid of Doom. Hey, man, that really hurt me. I must be honest.
I took it down. Hey, there's only so much thinking that a real VP Stormers fan died in the wool. That was all I cared about as a youngster, was making the provincial team. It's hard for me to be all in Bulls. I mean, I was with you guys, but I'm not as devastated as you.
Of course, I get that. I mean, I felt the same way against the Stormers last year.
Yeah.
I was supporting you, but I wasn't brokenhearted when you didn't win. It's just the way it is.
And sometimes a little tiny chuckle at some things. Oh, that's funny. Yeah. I do think Bulls should always have some sacrosanct things that are never disturbed. One thing is a Bulls team should never have a non-dominant scrum. Another thing is if a Bulls team doesn't have a solid line out, like a killer, I'm talking like kick-arse line out, it's trouble. So I think you can look at one thing and just say, was that Bulls pack, did it bully Glasgow or was it somewhat bullied? I'm not trying to taunt you. I'm just saying there was a question about which pack bullied who. That can never be the case. Just going forward, 2025, Bulls have to always be the bully pack on the field in a final at home.
What made the Bulls of yesteryear dominant packs? What gave them a dominant packs? Locks. Pretoria was always the lock factory. Those two locks that we've got, they're great players, but they're too light. I'm telling you now.
They're okay. They're hard workers. They're good guys. That's it. Yeah. Not scary. I'm with Cam Hanekom on what he said a week ago. He said, if you come to Loftus, it must be bad. It must be bad for you. It must be an unhappy experience. The Glasgow Warriors did not look unhappy. They looked like a very happy camp, like a Ferguson, Jack Dempsey. They looked like they were full of beans and ready to go.
I want to tell you something else. Yesterday, just before we do this Afrikaans broadcasting and commentary, I told you, and I went to get a quick beer. And as I walked back up, the steps are quite small. They're only about this high. So I miscalculated. So I went like flying and I almost dropped my entire beer on Peter Rousseau. Slap chips. Luckily, I know him from talking to him. So I went afterwards and listen, I'm not drunk or anything. I just misstepped. I had a misstep here and he was laughing at me, but it was quite funny. He was there, both times. Last week he was there. This week he was there. On
Peter Rousseau, The guy who always scored tries against the All Blacks with that awkward stutter step.
Slap chips.
But after a while, you realized that slap chip step was actually his step. It wasn't. He wasn't actually putting his step. That's just the way
hands all over the place. Yeah, that him. He's coaching Paul Gymnasium. He's the coach there at the moment.
So I think he would have understood your stumble, because I always thought every try he scored, he was stumbling.
Yeah, it looked like he was stumbling, but he wasn't. That's a secret. No? It's a funny thing you talked about it. Even I also talked about it yesterday, about the cap wings or the broke backs or the sapperbacks compared to the kind of wing that he was. Complete opposites. Now, he was tall, he was lanky, was fast, but he wasn't this kind of a thing. No? Complete change of style.
It's such an interesting thing. We'll call them cap backs. They swivel, like that's why I said hip swiveling. They just are able to turn, and I think what it does is it allows 13 to play differently in the box system. It's actually very interesting. Once you have a guy on the wing who can do double backs, or Stuart Lancaster said double involvements, which we saw on the weekend by Edville, it changes everything for the 13. Then it can be more of a straight line, George North coming down the pike, stop me if you can, Creel type. You don't have to have a Lucanio arm doing so much swiveling. And I think it's interesting on the break and on the counter. If you've got that in spare behind you, and they can always double back and out athlete someone, then I think 12 and 13 can look a lot more steamroller.
I know. I tell you what. Now, I've been the last two games. Last week when Sergio Peterson played, and this week when Kirtley was back. There's a huge difference, and it's not just the swivel big; it's the acceleration from standstill.
Yeah,
Kirtley is like a cartoon. He's that fast. It's like unbelievable.
I saw Sergio make a move on somebody and left him in the dust, and I just thought, I'm with you. It wasn't. You cannot put it all down onto one, even though I kind of had with Akker at the mall, and he might have been injured too. But I do think if the Bulls had been able to put more of a mismatch on the wings more often, it also would have been a different game. I think Bulls could have scored their typical score, 30 points.
Yeah, sorry, I keep hopping on about the Bulls, but they scored 85 tries in the normal season, regular season, record-breaking try scores, and they just never did anything yesterday. You said, like yourself, you said yourself, Glasgow scored 3 tries, we scored 1. The best try scoring team in the competition, highest points and everything. They just took us out of the game, man. They outplayed us. That was it.
Yeah, I looked at how you guys got the 88 tries, and I looked across and I said, so what were the stats the Bulls were the best at across the comp, across the season? So it was kick retention, so going up and getting the kick, not enough of those at all. Evasiveness, top 3, line breaks going to try, that didn't happen, and offloads, 183 offloads of the season, and then in the final nothing. Dominant tackles, I'm talking rock you out of your socks tackles, that didn't really develop either. There was one I think I saw, but they were too comfortable. And then I think on the line out, it's interesting. I actually almost thought that the Glasgow had the better line out on the day, which again to me Bulls DNA should never be the case.
Franke said they have what they call the line-out committee, and they targeted the Bulls specifically. And he said he wasn't happy with the committee because they didn't deliver on what they promised. They did very well, but they could have done better. And that was one of the things he was smiling about. They targeted the Bulls line.
That's very smart. Yeah. It's very smart to take your opponent's biggest strength away from him. I love that. I love that idea in conflict. You go in so cocksure about something, and someone takes that very thing away from you. It's horrible. Then where do you go? Where do you go to your plan B or plan C? You feel bad. So you keep trying your plan A, it doesn't work, and then the match is over.
The funny thing, I keep hopping on about this again, but he comes from Lichtenburg apparently, Franke Smit. He lived in Bloemfontein, coached the Cheetahs and the whatever. And the fact that he's so at home in Scotland, and he's being so welcomed so much, he become part of the fabric. And the little story that he told when he walked in that right in the beginning, one morning, he brought polystyrene cups to the training ground, and he got them each a bit of a sip of whiskey, and he said, taste this whiskey and remember it when you drink it again once you've won the UFC final. So he made this mental connection to winning. That's why I'm saying he can be a future Springbok coach. It's not just a little blunt run over them kind of a coach. He's the kind of a Rossi coach who thinks further than just what happens on the field. There's more to it than just tactics and strategy and mauling and whatever else it might be. And that's what I like, a smart coach.
Rugby is thinking, guys. Actually, you compare our sport against other sports. There's not that many sports that have as interesting people in the locker room. You got to tell them a story. I think that's brilliant, by the way, of having a drink now, we drink again. That's beautiful. That's good storytelling. That's beginning of the story once upon a time, and then the end, and they all lived happily ever after. Look, man, people like stories.
Yeah, they do. But now our time is now officially up again. So
We did it.
I'm going to call it a day. I appreciate it, Harry. It was lekker. We'll talk soon.
Cheers.
This is the Lekker Rugby Pod with Harry Jones and MW Welman.